Это перевод.
Это мы знаем.
Был.
Не-не, я смотрю. Английский язык. Раз, два, три. Раз, два, три, английский.
Now we see the same picture. And we are hoping that the package that has been announced by the president, it has this demographic flavor, and that's how it's positioned. We view it as a supportive policy for the population to support families with children. These children, these families are at risk, at a greater risk of becoming poor. We are doing this for a purpose. These benefits for 3-year-olds, they are 500 billion. Wages certainly are the biggest contributor. Without growing wages, we cannot achieve much. The government may offer minimum wages. Of course, we are raising it, and that is one mechanism, that is one instrument. Businesses, employers also should give some response. We are cooperating between 3 different sides. Indexation of wages is another important tool. So that is the kind of transfers that we are witnessing. We do not think that this is the final arrangement. I think we are going to do a lot more thinking. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Alexei. So my understanding is that we know where we are. This is not the first crisis that we are facing. We have coped fairly well with the last one. So we are going to relocate some funds. We are going to take care of the 10% decline in real income, up to 12%. That's what we have seen so far. The question remains, that is a question that Tatiana has offered. Are we going to fill the pit holes, or we are going to encourage the growth of the middle class? That is a strategic question. Natalia, now I would like to revisit the spatial concept. You said that the Ministry of Economic Development is saying that we have wage growth. However, in practical terms, that has to do with some big cities and big industries. In Russia, we have very versatile economy. We have overall effect that is different from what we would like to have. How it works in Russian environment, that is a big question. We see growing social issues, and we see more effective social policy. So do you want me to talk about problems, or do you want me to talk about forecasts for the future? Let's focus on the current situation. We're not doing well with incomes. In one quarter of the country where we have seen growth, most of the people are employed by the government. Those who are doing better do not see many changes. This crisis has little to do with unemployment. What is interesting to me is the situation with the budget. We have not seen very significant changes. One thing that is different is that the difference between Moscow and the rest of the country has become greater. And two, the money, the investment money, flow into 2 directions: oil and gas regions and the country capital. The rest of them are not getting much. I don't think this is new for you. Now, let's talk about real life, about the problems that we are facing. Is social policy going to remain a national priority? I understand that you've been trying to put together something politically correct. What are we talking about? there's one priority for the federal budget, that is payments of benefits. That is the only social priority. As of regional budgets, the situation is different. Those are the people who are responsible for the social policy in Russia. The share of social spendings between 12 and 16 reduced from 61 to 58%. That is the spendings of all consolidated budgets. You see where it's going. In 2015, we have not increased our spending on education and culture. In 2016, we were not doing great in healthcare. I'm not going to give you numbers. You can find them on your own. And now in 2017, we started saving on social benefits. What is going to happen next? The regions cannot spend more. Fortunately, we do not see the deficit like in 13, 14, and 15. When the Ministry of Finance says that we're doing great and we have a surplus in the budget, most of that comes from Moscow. In the rest of the country, things are different. So the social maneuver, the budget maneuver, where's the money? That is a relevant question for the region. B, where should they go in their social programs? They should allocate money to specific programs. Are we going to reduce the network in the future, or we are going to slow this reduction down? What is going to happen to social benefits? Are we going to target our benefits towards the people in need? The ministry has created a methodology. However, the regions have to address the local situation. And the final question is, are we going to introduce the so-called model budget? That should give an explanation to the regions what they should spend their money on, and then everybody is going to follow that example. That will be against the principle of federalism. People at the top do not understand that salvation comes from variety. We have areas that have serious debts. In Mordovia, they have a very significant debt. And by the way, the governor is still in his position. Where should we get the money? The federal government is going to tell the regions what they should do. Let's face it. We need to see improvements in social programs in the regions. However, this dictatorship from the federal center is not the best way to address the problem. Thank you. Thank you, Natalia. Thank you to all presenters who mind the time limit. It is a hard job to interrupt a presenter, but I can do it. I can do it. Now, I would invite everyone to come back to what we started from. We're now talking about the future. We understand the legacy of the economic recession. We understand that we have to do certain things. We know that the government has experience in responding to the crisis, and we are confident that we are going to cope with this consequences of the recession. Also, we understand that versatility of the regions creates opportunities rather than problems. This versatility gives us more options. It creates greater potential. Then the next question is what we are going to do about all this. Now, I would like to invite Lydia Ovcharova from the Center of Strategic Studies to give us her opinion. Social support and investment in social capital. is the priority. So, what is the role of those things, and what criteria are we looking at? If we see investment in that, how are we going to go about it? You have 5 minutes. I will spend these 5 minutes by telling you this. What kind of social policy we need? That is the question that I would like to address. Whether or not it's going to remain a national priority is a provocative question. It's always a priority. What is important, though, is what kind of social policy we have. There are 3 points that I would like to make. One, we need the kind of social policy that will help to achieve good economic growth. If we don't have that, then it will be difficult to turn our country into a successful knowledge economy. I see 2 possible scenarios that are directly related to social policy. One is health industry, and the other is education. Health support is one of those things. So that is where the social policy is going to be aimed at. I can explain why I'm thinking that. Let me also tell you that on top of the oil prices and success of market economy, our economy has recently been getting 3 important bonuses.
First is demographic bonus. When 2005-2010, we achieved maximum proportion of able-bodied population. We never had like that working age, the biggest proportion ever. Because few people went out of that age and many people entered that age. And education, following demographics, many people 20 to 24 years old were very well educated. That was maximum that could have been achieved during that time. And the third thing is consumer behavior of the population. 2013, by that year, we achieved a situation where 40% of the population had so-called development budget, family development budget. You cannot call these people middle class. It's a slightly different category. I'm one of the people who believe we have a much smaller middle class, 20 to 25%. But what's the family development budget, in my understanding? This is when basic needs, you spend 50% of your consumer spending, and the development, which is education, healthcare services, not pharmaceuticals, and recreation, at least 10% spent there. In 2013, it was about 40%. Why is this 40% important? Because if we have a big proportion of households who have development budgets, that would mean that we are on the right path where we can get out of those traps of countries with a middle level of GDP. We have a medium of GDP per population. We're about 41st in the world, $25,000 per capita, roughly. So what are these traps I mentioned? These are the traps like this. Who is going to pay for pension benefits, quality education, and quality health care? If the majority of the population follows the basic consumer standard, then it's not the people who pay for that. But if it's development budget, majority of the population, then the people themselves would be able to pay for that to achieve a level where investment in education would be comparable to other countries with the economy of knowledge. We have huge human potential, but low human capital, and this is something that has to be addressed. How to get out of that? These are the bonuses I mentioned. Since my time is running out, well, let's refer that to the discussion part, questions and answers, how to fight poverty, how to promote education, healthcare, etc. I'll be happy to address these topics during the Q&A session. Thank you. Now, you're very meticulous in following the time limit. Lydia. Well, discussing individual industries, let me start from the most difficult thing. Being a professor, I may believe that the situation is the worst in education, but to be honest with you, I believe that healthcare is a big problem. I now know why I'm moderating this session, because I'm in an educational establishment which is financed by the government. By age, I'm a pensioner, and sometimes I use the services of healthcare. So I'm in this category. So you're in the group of risk. Well, let's start healthcare. Inside of me, and being part of the group of the Economic Council with the President, we're developing a strategy 2024, and I focused on healthcare, and I said that the insurance model would not work. Therefore, well, you can spend a lot of money there, but maybe there could be other models. I said we need a quasi-budgetary model. That's my personal viewpoint. But there could be other ways to address this. Vladimir, how to address the issues facing the healthcare? Well, the insurance model does not work because it's not a really insurance-based model. It cannot work like this because this is not a real insurance policy.
Придется искать.
We need to look for the model, and not a single country of the world can serve as an example. Everybody is looking for the right way. Some are more successful, some are less successful, and this is an intellectual challenge, and where we can reach a point of singularity, maybe closer to the end of the century, where the market of health services becomes very much unified, like a commodity market, and the government will not then play a role. But that's far into the future. And what we have right now in Russia, why does not our model work? What makes it different from the models that do work? First of all, our first problem is that we don't really know what the government pays for. Unless you have defined what you do within the framework of government health care, it's very difficult to perform one's obligations. The government in other countries is very clear about what is paid by the government and what's outside, what the government pays for. What we did, we also only extracted dental care and cosmetology. It's mainly for pay, and all the rest, we said, would be for free. Long lines, not an instrument to contain costs, etc. But what we need to define is what is for pay, what is for free. It's a lot of work to be done there because this would involve developing special standards, but we need those standards. And we need these standards to define what exactly is for money and what is for free. Once we define this, we have a different situation. Voluntary insurance would have a different meaning. Now, with free healthcare, up to 50% of expenses. Well, if we either make everything for free, and this should not be done. Other countries have very flexible arrangements then, using all sorts of resources, various resources of the family, and in the insurance models, where the government limits its role in healthcare, the proportion of citizens is 20 to 30%, not 50% like us. Another very important element. We call our model an insurance model, but the role of insurance companies would very marginal. They act like auditors of healthcare, but I believe we should get back to the idea that we had at the start of the 1990s, and in pilot regions, not immediately for the whole country. We need to try implement a real insurance model. What makes it a real insurance model? We have to distinguish between the buyer of healthcare from the insurer. Now they are all together in the regional authorities. When the regional authorities manage all healthcare establishments, at the same time they pay for the healthcare through the territorial fund which belong to them as well. They define special commissions where the role of the regional minister of healthcare is also the leading one, and the insurance company are not responsible for anything. And medical assurance assistance could be provided by any providers, whether private or government-owned, but there's one company that pays for that, who are not the founders of these three types of institutions. We have to distinguish between those. Insurance companies should buy healthcare. They should have responsibility for the quality of medical services in terms of the health condition of the population, make them interested financially. If they perform to good quality standards and they can save money, they will stay with that money. This is my idea. Thank you, Vladimir. Dear friends, what is good about meeting the time limits? It's good because you have an opportunity now to ask questions, and we can handle 5 questions. We'll see where we're more interested in, and we'll see how to continue the discussion based on your question. While you're getting prepared, let me remind you that a question should always be ending with a question mark. It's a short statement with the question tip at the end. And before you start asking questions, let me tell you this. Education is also that where we should be thinking about models. As a Jubilee session, 25 years Learned Council of the Higher School of Economics, the rector of that institution, Mr. Kuzmin, said that one of the problems that we have right now is that in the Higher School of Economics, masters, the bachelors of art are better than masters of art, and masters of art better than postgraduates. Also during that meeting, it was said that a primary school is better than secondary school. So deriving from this, my conclusion would be that if education tried to find natural abilities of a person, then a system of education wins. But what I heard today, Georgiev, in plenary session, is that the Singaporean minister said they were in top 10, but that was a rating of the 20th century. So questions now. The microphone is there. Okay, brief question. The question cannot be heard by translation. Thank you. Thank you. So who would volunteer to answer? You, please. Well, you mentioned dynamics coefficient but there could be incomes, that could be health in terms of income. We're a country that inside the top 20 of a big gap between rich and poor, and in terms of wealth, we are again close to Ukraine in terms of the gap between high wealth and low wealth, in terms of concentration of resources in the 1% of the wealthier strata of the population. This is another big problem. Why out of the industrial economy we cannot move on to a different stage using simply the tools available to the educational system into the economy of knowledge, because economy of knowledge is inclusive. At least 50% should be involved, but at this point in time 1% of the population contributes to growth. So the inequality global challenge is quite serious in this country, one of the biggest challenges facing this country. What would be your forecast? The dynamics, the gap is increasing in terms of wealth, in terms of income. We're at the same time a level over time. Next question. The question cannot be heard by translation. And is there a question mark at the end? Yeah. Well, since you had a question, I will make a statement in response. We should be aware that we cannot ensure equality to all social groups at the same time. But benefits is not the thing I like, because it ends bad. We followed that route of benefits to individual strata of population, so I wouldn't speak about benefits rather than priorities. And the priority, and finally, and it's very good, the policy of business cycle. After 6 years at the end, we now have this program, not on demographic measures, but fighting poverty. We have this program right now. And the benefits is something I think we should not be using at all. But the concern is this: since we're focusing on the incomes and well-being of families with children, but we also managed to reduce poverty among retired people. And we are now monetary poverty among the retired persons, the pensioners, we managed to reduce dramatically. But now it's going back to growing, the poverty among pensioners. So the right thing to do is to set the right priorities, and we should feel responsible before all social groups of population, but the level of responsibility to various groups should be different. Some people are not interested in money, then we should provide money to them. Other people are interested in institutions rather than money, then we should build those institutions. And some people need short-term support. Like most demographic programs that we have, it's not for a full life. Only for certain demographic events. So we need to identify the resources that are needed by various social groups, and then it would come to normal. The question cannot be heard by translation. Thank you. Maybe, Alexei, you're the right person to answer. Whether they stay or do not stay. Now, do not give us a question, give us an answer, whether it's so or not. Today, there is nothing in administrative or political agenda to change any organizational or legal form of those funds. No, it's not on the agenda. They simply have to improve on their actions if there is room for improvement, whether it comes you down or not. But the official answer is no. That is not going to change. The Center of Strategic Developments is not looking into that either. You have had an opportunity to ask your question. Please question. What should be the criteria of a social state? The proportion of GDP expenditure for social needs is not the right criterion, like measuring the results of your work by how tired you are. No, like spending so much money is not the criterion. While lifespan is one, good performance in healthcare, some results in education as a criterion. But this result can be achieved, sometimes cannot be achieved. Some countries very sparing in healthcare, like South Korea. They spend very little on healthcare, but they have very good quality of life. Education is the same. There are countries with very strong private system of education, like the United States of America, and they're leaders in higher education, at least, although it's paid for education. But our criterion should be based on efficiency and the goals that we set ourselves as a society. Once we answer this question, we will spend whatever we need to achieve those goals, whether it's 10% of GDP or 40% of GDP. But first, we have to define what our objectives are and which instruments we're going to use to achieve those objectives. I'd like to support you in that sense that if we measure a social well-being in terms of money spent, it's not the right thing to do. Like Karl Marx once said, he spoke about people who when they're excited, they're inspired, or when they're tired, they've had a good work. No, it's not the right approach. What is your question, please? So the question was what? Why do we not have minimal social standard? Okay, who is going to answer? Natalia, please. Because it's impossible to achieve what is good for Ingushetia, a small republic, very small, with very few institutions, cannot be used for Chukotka and Yamal Republic, and especially Moscow. That could not be a single standard for all republics and units, administrative units of the Russian Federation. This is the country we have, and we have to be aware of that. We cannot have a single unified standard. If the country breaks up into all those republics, then they can have those individual standards. I do think that we need a reasonable compromise. We do have some minimal standards. We have minimal guarantees. We have minimum wage. We have social pensions. And that is close to the minimum living standard, and we have some guarantees in education and healthcare. But Natalia is right that from various regions, for various social groups, these guarantees should be different. We cannot have the same minimum wage in Moscow for a person who lives alone or have dependents, and a person who lives in Dagestan doesn't have dependents, and these are different things. You cannot have the same standard applied to all, but of course we have minimum guarantees. Sometimes maybe we need to be a little bit harsher, but this is the approach we're using. And of course, we need a federal program to fight poverty, which should be implemented in all regions. We should have a similar understanding of what poverty is, and we need a program that would cover all the regions to fight poverty. Last question, please. We will have some more discussion after this final question. Maybe we will have questions afterwards as well, after the discussion.
Борьбы с социальным неравенством.
It was not a question, was it? How would you interpret it, as a question or not? Don't you know the question was? Okay, let's try to answer. First of all, we have to be aware that social inequality is something that can have all sorts of definitions. Inequality of income, inequality of accessibility of social institutions, regional inequality is also something that we would always have, like Natalia has said. The mechanisms of how to reduce social inequality, well, we should identify those types of inequality that we have to address, and we need to make sure that we assure certain minimum levels. The upper part, the incomes could be very high, no problem. That access to all sorts of social institutions, if there is one, is as good. But what we should focus on is the social lower levels, assured minimum levels. This is something that we need to have in place. And the best way to do that, to overcome that inequality, I already mentioned before. Social group. Since olden times, those social groups, the middle class, while the best way to address that is to grow middle class. This is something that would be very important, very good for the state, like Aristotle once said, because the middle class is something that helps bridge the gap between the very rich and the very poor. If we manage to emerge from the current situation, maybe next Gaidar Forum, we discuss this again, how to grow the middle class, then that would mean that we have started addressing this issue. It's a social driver to remove inequality in society, growing the middle class. Did I promise to moderate the next Gaidar Forum? No, I didn't. I would like to ask other panelists to address this particular issue. The most powerful institute of social mobility is secondary school, where children for various social groups go together. The army is a second. And a third is important, is territorial mobility and the institution of mortgage-based housing. Alexei. Are we talking about mobility right now or inequality? Inequality still. Which measures to take to resolve this problem? As at the government level, what we're doing is we try to raise the lower bar, the minimum wage, the wages of public workers, and all the measures taken at a regional level to fight poverty. Try raising the lower bar. We haven't done much to reduce the gap in salaries from top manager and rank and file workers. At least we are trying to do that in public institutions, and we're moving forward. Addressing the salaries and bonuses of top managers of biggest companies. That's a lot of resistance from those companies, and it's clear why. Not the same, but this is one of the focal points that we're doing, where we can act at the government level with the instruments available to us. Natalia? Lilia could have said that the main factor of inequality in Russia is a territorial factor. We're a big country, a middle-income country. Inequality is a factor which would stay there for a long time. Brazil, China, etc., is the same. Through the whole of the 21st century, we're going to be a country with high level of inequality, at least because of this regional inequality. Even if you could cut bonuses of top managers, the inequality would stay. Well, what we're doing, well, some of the territories are growing very quickly, and they're already in the lead, so the inequality is going to be bigger. Well, inequality in the Bible, in Genesis, well, they address that issue of inequality back in that book. And I agree with what Tatiana has said. Inequality could be different types. Inequality actually is the driver for growth, for development. If we had full equality, everything would be stalled. So it's bad when the inequality is not accepted by society as being unfair. When kids from rich families have more opportunities in life than the most talented children out of poor families, this is what is socially unacceptable. But if some people earn 100 rubles and others 1,000 rubles, this is accepted. And we need to create social lifts through education, through health care. The army could be a tool there. Supporting the most impoverished families is another instrument. That's how we can fight the socially unacceptable types of inequality. Other inequality is normal. It could be good for society.
Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I think that the experts now have warmed up and they can address more serious questions. Now, let's get down to business. Social policy becomes a national priority when we have to put down a crisis or we are at a turning point in a political cycle. Now we have to do all those things. So now it's a double priority. So let me pose the following question for the experts, for the panelists. Today, everybody is talking about human capital, investment in human capital, and this thing and the other. I'm an older man. I remember 2012 fairly well. I remember that back then announcements were made about some goals. And if we were to invite macroeconomic experts, if we were to look at the investment in healthcare as a share of GDP, then the truth is that things are not looking right. So the question is, what has to be done so that we do not just leave another mark on a political cycle map? What should be done to make this policy translate into long-term investment that would bring fruit maybe in 10 years' time or longer? I think longer. What do you think, ladies and gentlemen? I can give you 3 minutes for that. Well, let me throw some black paint first. First, the elite, or what we call the elite, should be able to think strategically and go beyond political and economic cycles. Two, we should see the demand from the bottom. The taxpayers should ask a question: what are we getting for the money we're paying? These are the two conditions that should be in place. Unless it happens, we are not going to see much change, and that is long term. Thank you. Who wants to speak next? Tatiana? I may give a much longer answer. Well, you have rightly said that we live between one crisis and the next one. We have gained a lot of experience. Over 25 years, we have seen 4 recessions. In 1990s, 1998, financial and currency crisis. Well, there was one, but that was a smaller caliber, was not so painful. Then 2008, 2010, the aftershocks of the world economic crisis, and now our own. This is like going to a gym regularly. We're a nation that can give a lot of advice about survival at the time of a crisis. We can do a national presentation and share it with the rest of the world. How to cope with a crisis. We have accumulated a lot of experience in social activities. We have seen very different scenarios. Whatever happened, let's say we have a new political and economic cycle. There will be new people coming into the political scene, and they will face a question: what has to be done? Reforms, money. What are we asking for? What do we need? Do we need reform, or do we need the money? We have done it all. In 1990, we didn't have the money. We didn't have any reforms. Nothing at all. Then, end of 1990s and all the way through the first decade of the next century, we have had a lot of reforms: labor reform, educational reform, healthcare reform. We still did not have a lot of money. We were using the same resources. One can criticize a lot of those reforms, but they did not require a lot of money. Then we entered the third phase. We had the money and no reforms. We gave people the maternity capital. We started a number of national priority projects in healthcare, in education. We have tried many things, and now we have only one option, one thing that we have not tried before. Let's do the reforms and support them with enough money. I'm speaking seriously. What is behind that? Without reforms, we cannot do. I guess the answer is clear. Is the social policy going to remain a national priority? I wonder what Alexei is going to say now, because you are not a part of the government. You're saying, let's have reforms. And there are quite a lot of people that do not want reforms. And let's allocate the money. So, Alexei, over to you. I can come up with a lot of positive examples when we showed good long-term planning and we carried out those plans. The concept of demographic policy has been launched in 2005, and it was covering more than 10 years. And we are making good progress through 3 phases of that reform. One cannot deny that. There are several systemic programs that are being implemented. I have been in public service for many years, and I cannot remember one year when we did not have any reforms. That is definitely so. This engine never stops. Every year we reform something. We pass new laws or amend existing laws, and this is the continuous process. I think it doesn't look like a reform any longer in many situations. We go through cycles, and we even forget what we were changing earlier on. We may extend the cycles, make them longer. That will make our planning horizons longer as well. So let's introduce 20-year-long political cycles. Then we will not be held responsible for the results. We are not the only people who become seriously active at the time of crisis. It happens everywhere. Prime Minister Thatcher launched her reforms not at the time of prosperity, but at the time when rats were running in the streets of London. Look at the United States. They started reforms when they had high inflation. By American standards, Obama has launched healthcare reform when the society faced a serious crisis. A lot of people were left out of the healthcare system, which was not good. This was a response to an acute situation every time. So to make headway, we need to have a strong need in the first place, and that need is growing, and we also have to have a long-term vision. The problem that I see with the strategies is obvious. What I like is the experience of some countries that in the beginning of a political cycle would adopt a strategy. Mexico has a 6-year-long program to fight poverty, and every year they enter a new phase. Ministers of healthcare, education, and other ministers are given specific tasks that they should address. We don't do that. We often review the priorities, and the priorities that we set are not reflected in the budget. It would be good if in the beginning of the new political cycle we could identify our priorities clearly and work on them hard. Some follow-up on that. We have launched a lot of reforms. However, we pass a lot of laws, but the implementation is not that great. many laws contradict one another. And we do not always know clearly what law is applicable to a specific situation. We have had a lot of reports for the government. People make a lot of reports. That is a great KPI. The number of reports that you submit to the government. Everybody is writing those reports, but they have little to do with real change that we are facing. We should be talking about real achievements, something measurable, something tangible. I would remind you of two areas, healthcare and education. I think we need two things to happen. Vladimir said that we do not have a clear understanding in the healthcare system, what we guarantee and what we do not guarantee. We have this understanding. The problem is that the healthcare system is trying to convince everyone that it's doing what it has committed to. Although we understand that they do not have the resources, they do not have the money to be true to their guarantees. It's obvious that they do not have enough money, they do not have enough resources in healthcare. Even when they increase numbers by 30%, that is just another attempt to get to where they want to be. This initial model, when we go to a doctor only when the situation is really bad, when we have to call an ambulance, it's still quite popular. People don't act like that in other parts of the world, but we do here. Most people would not go to a doctor until things turn really ugly. We are going to spend a lot of money on high-tech healthcare system, and they will take all the money we throw at them. However, we should focus more on the primary phase of medical services, when people do not have to be hospitalized. In education system, we show good numbers according to the PISA systems. However, 25% of school graduates are not getting the knowledge that is functional. We have a lot of capital. We have a lot of potential, but we do not have enough capital because we are not good at turning our potential into capital. That is what has to change. Okay, let us open the floor for questions and comments. Maybe people in the audience want to make some statements regarding the subjects that we're discussing. What should we do to make social policy priority in the beginning of a new political cycle, not at the end? We would like to see that change. Maybe somebody has any proposals, suggestions, comments. The panelists have said a lot of interesting things, but I cannot say that we have found a solution and now we're perfectly clear. I can offer 2 minutes to each person who wants to take the floor and make a comment. Please encourage this gentleman to use a microphone. Without a microphone, translation is not possible. Please use a microphone on the floor. Please use the microphone on the floor. Without a microphone, a comment cannot be translated. Please use a microphone on the floor. The translators cannot hear the comment because the microphone is not used. Please use a microphone to make a comment or a question. Please use the microphone. Please use the microphone. Translation is not possible when a microphone is not used. Please encourage use of microphones. Without a microphone, translation is not possible. Please use a microphone. Without a microphone, translation is not possible. Please use a microphone. Unless the person speaking is using the microphone, translation is not possible. Please use a microphone. Please use a microphone. People who make comments or ask questions need to use the microphone. Without that, translation is not possible. I'm sorry. I encourage everybody to stay to the subject of our panel. What should be done to make everybody focus on social policy? Please use the microphone. Please use a microphone. Without a microphone, translation is not possible. Translation will not work unless a person on the floor uses a microphone. Translators cannot hear the comments unless people on the floor use a microphone. What is your proposal? You have 1 minute left. Make your proposal. Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else has comments? Will you please bring the microphone over here?
На самом деле вожжи отпустить и не забывать, что социальное и экономическое связаны между собой. И когда мы говорим о социальной политике, то мы должны думать, а что мы должны делать экономической, чтобы она социальная работала. И мне кажется, что ключевая сегодня государство — это не только распределитель бюджета, это еще и регулятор. Да? И сегодня задача, как мне кажется, максимально, так сказать, отпустить вожжи таким образом, чтобы позволить реализоваться той активности, тому потенциалу, который существует в территориях, в человеке. Мы все время говорим о том, что вот давайте, пошли же по этому пути, давайте будем социально ориентированные некоммерческие организации, поддерживать малый бизнес, социальные предпринимательства. И тут же выстраиваем такие заборы вокруг этого, что пробиться через них нормальному человеку невозможно. И все время все равно стоит вопрос, как бы дотянуться до государства, которое вот щелку маленькую, так сказать, вот в этом заборе все-таки, так сказать, сделает, и кто-нибудь все-таки пролезет. Вот мне кажется, что об этом надо помнить, и ключевая задача впереди — это понять, что государство — это не только патрон, но это регулятор, у которого должна быть разумная управленческая политика.
Спасибо, спасибо. Пожалуйста, сюда, пожалуйста.
Over here, will you please pass the microphone over there?
Институт бюджетных решений. У меня такое предложение. Вот тут многократно говорилось о том, что у нас непрерывно проводятся реформы. И это действительно так. К сожалению, у этих реформ всегда непросчитываемые последствия. Можно рассказать о побочных эффектах указов президента от 7 мая 2012 года. Можно сейчас предполагать побочные эффекты от повышения минимального размера оплаты труда, которые будут, будь здоров, какие, которые особенно с 1 мая теперь у нас будет, а не с 2019 года, как планировалось. Поэтому предложение заключается в том, что на самом деле дать все реформы, которые проводятся так, проводить не в масштабе всей страны, а на добровольцах. Вот. Есть пилотные регионы, которые с удовольствием у себя апробируют всякие новые практики. Пермский край проводил, я не рекламирую тут, вот, не имею никакого отношения к Пермскому краю, например, Пермский край, Республика Башкортостан, они проводили у себя эксперимент по привлечению социально ориентированных коммерческих организаций к оказанию социальных услуг. Результаты хорошие, как бы, да. Вот, показали, что хорошие результаты, тогда в масштабах всей страны. Вот хорошо бы и прочие, как бы, такие вот социальные реформы, чтобы регионы добровольно их бы у себя проводили, получая на это право законодательное, да, сверху. А если все хорошо, тогда уже в масштабе всей страны распространять.
Спасибо большое. Спасибо. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we're going to bring this to an end. Oh, okay, you have another comment. This will be the last one. You have 2 minutes for that.
Вопрос к Алексею Вовченко для размышлений. Когда в стране ручное управление, когда президент регулирует расписание электричек и решает вопросы заработной платы этим морякам на Сахалине, это ни одна социальная программа не будет работать. Поймите правильно. Нужно наладить управление, долговременное социальное развитие каждой территории. Управленческий ресурс самый главный для России. И мы сегодня никак не можем договориться, как же мы будем управлять. Сферой образования, сферой здравоохранения и так далее. Бесконечно идут вот какие, и не найдешь крайнего. Мне кажется, что с этого надо начинать. Надо начинать с управления. Государственное управление, региональное управление, местное самоуправление напрочь выключено из социальной политики. Я в районах бываю, я советник губернатора. И знаю, в деревне бываю, в малом городе бываю. Я вижу, каким образом ни одной задачки маломальской нельзя решить. Задачки. Школу закрывают, в этой школе уже ничего нельзя сделать. Медпункт закрыли, школу закрыли, клуб закрыли, библиотеку закрыли. Ни на что денег нет. О какой социальной политике мы говорим? Вопрос управления теми колоссальными ресурсами, которыми располагает Россия. Они колоссально используются, эти ресурсы, неудовлетворительно. Согласен с вами, человеческий капитал тоже используется плохо.
Вы знаете, коллеги,
You know what, colleagues? I have said many times that true religion in Russia is not Russian Orthodox or Islam, but rather it's pessimism. When experts say that things are going to be bad, everybody believes that. Everybody trusts that opinion, especially when we're talking about social policy. The picture that we are ending up with is quite gloomy. There's been many statements made. Some of them connect well, some do not. I think that gives us a lot of food for thought for the regulators, for universities. In conclusion, I would like to say something more optimistic. I would like to tell you a joke. Man is complaining to the God. He says, my life is so bad. I'm sick. I don't have any money. I have fought my wife. I am not friends with my children. I am out of job. And God tells him, don't pull my leg. Are we going to extend this life or not?